Big 12 Radio, Big 12 Today, heard on TuneIn, watched on Big 12 Studios, reacting to round one of the NFL Draft last night. Ryan Roberts, NFL Draft college football analyst for A to Z Sports, joining us here on Big 12 Radio to react with us to round one. Big day for the Big 12, Ryan. 3 top 10 picks, 6 in the first round overall. I guess off the top, just give us kind of your overall thoughts on the first round.
Yeah, I mean, it was chaos, and we kind of thought it was going to be a little bit of chaos kind of going in. I think we talked about it last time I was on the show, but there was just not a lot of consensus after the first couple picks in terms of we knew kind of what the first 2 to 3 picks probably would be. But then after that, it was just pick your flavor, basically, in a class that doesn't have a lot of top-end talent. It's more about the depth into, late first round into second round. So it was a little bit of just organized chaos, for lack of a better word. And we saw a few trades, but we saw some team player fits that maybe we haven't really even kind of talked about much leading up to the event. But as always, it's entertaining, which is, obviously what we love to see on the first night of the draft. But it's going to be really interesting to see how things kind of play out, because teams' boards, as the media's boards are, the draft Twitter's boards, everybody's boards were very different this year. So it just kind of made for a little bit of fun on the first night, I think.
All right, so those teams that took guys that maybe weren't on anybody's radar, like in terms of fit, who are the guys you're talking about? And is Jordan Tyson one of them going to the Saints?
No, Tyson's actually one that I thought made a lot of sense. I actually thought when the Chiefs were announced to trade up that at 6, they might do it, but obviously they needed to prioritize defense with the defections they had. But I think Tyson, as long as he's healthy, is a top 10 player in this class. And it seems that seeing him run routes at his de facto pro day after the fact, I think did kind of calm some people's nerves. And as I reported right at the combine, his medicals did come back in a good spot. So clearly teams were excited about him. And I think that we kind of saw that late rise to quote unquote into the top 10, which he was probably always going to go as long as everything checked out. And I think that you're talking about the Cleveland Browns at number 9 were another team that maybe could have taken a Jordan Tyson if he would have fallen there as well. So Tyson wasn't the shock, really. The shock, I don't even know if I would call it a shock, but Cornell Tate to the Titans at number 4 was a little bit surprising based upon like Arvell Reese being on the board. But the 3 biggest by far were 13, I believe it was the Rams pick when they took Ty Simpson, the quarterback out of Alabama. Everything the Rams have done this offense is very 2026 oriented. Like it's like boom or bust, let's go win a championship, and then you draft a guy that's probably not going to help you and is going to be a backup quarterback for you in 2026. Just kind of a little bit of a strange one there. And then you had Caleb Banks to Minnesota at 18. Not that Caleb Banks talent-wise isn't good enough to be the 18th pick. He absolutely is. But it's with the injury concerns, and I just frankly thought he was going to fall out of the first round. So that was a little bit of an odd one. And there was one more that I had wanted to mention real quick. It was Jadarian Price, the pick to the Seahawks. I understand that running back at 32 is a big need for Seattle, but I just didn't think, and this is a guy that actually is a Notre Dame fan, like I just didn't think Jadarian Price was a true first-round prospect. So a few funky ones there, but I really do think that the interesting part of the draft got started off when the Cardinals decided to stick and pick with Jeremiah Love, and then the Titans decided to go wide receiver over Arvell Reese at 4.
Who are guys that you thought would be first-round picks that did not?
Well, I mean, the Jamal McCoy stuff obviously came out late in terms of, some teams being not comfortable with his medicals, others being okay with it. So I thought he would still probably sneak into the back in the first round after falling a little bit, but he's still available after day 1. His teammate Colton Hood is another talented cornerback that's available after day 1, so we'll probably see both those guys off the board pretty early. And then the interior offensive line board didn't come off the way I thought it was going to. I thought Chase Basantis out of Texas A&M was probably going to come off, and then potentially Emmanuel Pregnon at the end of the first round out of Oregon as well. So the interior offensive line run didn't quite start. Didn't start the way I thought it was going to, and then I thought 2 of those corners might potentially go in the back end, so they'll be available early on day 2.
In terms of Ahanichor, his fit, Malachi Lawrence, his fit, and then David Bailey, obviously, at number 2, and Fano. Just how do you feel about, you mentioned Tyson, but the other Big 12 guys taken and their destinations?
Yeah, and Max Ahanichor is a really interesting one at 21 to Pittsburgh, because clearly that tells you that they're not comfortable with where Broderick Jones is coming back from his injury, and he's been very up and down as a player and mostly down over the last couple of years. So I think clearly there's going to be an intentionality to strengthen offensive tackle, but it's going to be an interesting one because obviously Max was a right tackle at Arizona State the last couple of years. That's the position he knows. And Pittsburgh, you would say, has a bigger need right now at left tackle. So clearly he's a player that they think can make that move athletically. I think he can too with the length and athleticism. So we'll see how early he can entrench himself into that battle. It'll be very interesting to see. I think the Malachi Lawrence pick I like in a vacuum in terms of, and I was talking about this before we went on air, but like Malachi Lawrence is a really toolsy pass rusher whose upside is tremendous, and I am always a fan for the most part. You know, you pick and choose your spots at times, but I'm typically a fan of betting on traits on the edge because I think that traits on the edge matter so much. So I really do think that it is a gamble in the 20s at 23 to the Dallas Cowboys, but they have a huge edge need. They need guys like Donovan Ezeraku to take a step forward in year 2 as well. But like, you're going to need Malachi Lawrence at least to prepare to give you some pass rush juice in year 1. And obviously he has the talent to do so. It's just going to be the question of like how fundamentally he comes along from a technical perspective, continuing that power. So I'm interested in seeing just kind of the early return on the pick, but I think the long-term could be pretty fun. You mentioned another one that's like an interesting one, similar to Iheanacho, but like Spencer Fano, who I know started at left tackle as a true freshman at Utah in 2023. So left tackle is not necessarily foreign to him, but we know that Cleveland has a massive need at left tackle. Like the right tackle spot is in a solid spot with Titus Howard. You rebuilt your interior offensive line this offseason. You need to find a left tackle. So clearly they believe, and we'll see if they're right or wrong, they believe that Spencer Fano can come in and be a left tackle in the NFL despite not playing there over the last couple seasons. I think he has the athletic traits to do so, but he's also a player that some teams viewed as an interior offensive lineman. Some liked him as a center, some liked him as guard, some liked him as a right tackle. So the opinions on him were a little bit all over the place, and we're going to see how well he can lock down the blind side probably immediately. And then David Bailey, it was always going to be, and I think we talked about this last time I was on, like it was always going to be Bailey or Reese or Bailey. Like that was going to be the number 2 pick for the Jets. It had kind of gone back and forth early. It was Arvell Reese, then it flipped to Bailey, then it flipped back to Reese, and then obviously Bailey ends up being the pick. The Jets are clearly looking for the guy that's a more proven commodity for what they need as a player. Arvell Reese is incredibly versatile, but there are some question marks in terms of what his best fit is schematically. You know what David Bailey is. David Bailey is a pin your ears back, get after the quarterback. I am interested to see how he does in terms of mixing and matching with Will McDonald because they do have somewhat similar skill sets, so hopefully there's not redundancy there. But I think clearly they wanted a guy that can get after the quarterback, and David Bailey, as we saw in 2025 with Texas Tech, he's a guy that can certainly do that.
Yeah, I'm with you on Lawrence. Felt like a reach. Love Lawrence the player, but, again, we'll see. And then curious for your thoughts on the Patriots basically taking left tackles in back-to-back seasons. Campbell did not have a great rookie year, especially in the playoffs. And Lomu's, as you mentioned, Fano played left tackle, then moved to right tackle for Lomu. And I believe the Patriots said after the draft that Campbell's left tackle and Lomu will play right tackle. But that's an interesting transition for a guy that's played left tackle. And again, 2 back-to-back left tackles in the first round for New England.
Yeah, it's interesting. Me and my co-host Joe DeLeon at Best Pod Available, we were talking about this after the fact because no matter what happens, if Caleb Lomu starts at right tackle in 2026 or is the swing developmental guy behind Morgan Moses